the afternoon briefing session, and we will, sorry, hang on, just give me a sec, I'll just pull up my Main South Yaldhurst. Right, so we're talking about the Main South Yaldhurst Riccarton intersection this afternoon. Gemma and Stephen, thank you. Over to you.
No, we need it.
We need to talk about the Main South Yaldhurst intersection. Microphone. Is it not on?
Microphone.
Thanks. Yep, sorry. So we'll just give a little bit of background to the why and what's happened to get us to this stage. So the intersection is formed as a half seagull arrangement with the main road flow being Riccarton Road and Yaldhurst Road. Vehicles turning right from Main South Road only need to give way to westbound vehicles on Riccarton Road and then merge with Riccarton eastbound traffic in their own lane approaching Hanson's Lane. This creates an area of weaving where eastbound traffic wanting to use Hanson's Lane crosses over in between people travelling east from Main South Road wanting to access Waimari Road. In terms of crash risk, this intersection sits within the top 3% of intersections within Christchurch, where there is risk of having a crash. In this location, in a 10-year period, there was 83 crashes, 76 of which involved people turning right from Main South Road and crashing with a vehicle travelling west on Riccarton Road. Of these 76 crossing and turning crashes, 2 resulted in a serious injury and 6 resulted in a minor injury. The remaining 68 crashes that were non-injury crashes, however, on several occasions fens have attended due to the significant damage to vehicles. Ambulances have also been dispatched to many of the crashes alongside police. This crash type varies from 2 to 12 per year. In the crash reports, drivers have stated that they have either failed to see a vehicle, failed to give way, or misjudged the speed of the vehicle. In terms of active users, the Church Corner area includes the Bush Inn Centre, Church Corner Mall, St Peter's Church, a medical centre, supermarkets, local shops and businesses. The University of Canterbury and student accommodation is located to the north, with Villa Maria and Kirkwood Intermediate also being close to the intersection. These will generate foot traffic, so there's a need to provide safer access for people wanting to cross the road. With eastbound traffic being unimpeded, there are higher through movement speeds. So Council took out a proposal to close Main South Road at Yaldhurst Road and Riccarton Road. Following the hearing of deputations at the 15th of February 2024 meeting at the Waipuna Hallswell Hornby Riccarton meeting, where they considered the report on Church Corner and Waimari Road, the board resolved the majority of the recommendations. However, they didn't support the closure of the right turn out of Main South Road or the pedestrian crossing on Riccarton Road. At its meeting on the 14th of March, following receipt of new information, the board again considered whether to revoke the 15th of February decision regarding those recommendations and approve them as originally put forward by council officers. The motion was declared lost and the status quo was upheld. At an extraordinary meeting on the 9th of April, the board again considered a notice of motion to revoke its 15th of February decision regarding the officer recommendations. The mover, with the agreement of the board, amended the original notice of motion. They resolved to revoke its previous decision to delegate the authority to make a decision on recommendations to the council and request that staff provide options to keep the right-hand turn and the dual crossing and to mitigate serious crash incidences. So following that meeting, staff have looked at alternative options that have been identified as being reasonably practicable. So that includes option 1, which is to retain the left turn out movement, which was discussed at the 15th of February meeting. Option 2, to retain the right turn out from Main South Road with a seagull arrangement. Option 3, retain the right turn out via a standard T intersection layout. And option 4, again, to remove the right turn from Main South Road and retain the left turn out. So option 1 and 4 are very similar, and that's to remove the right turn out. Options 2 and 3, retain the right turn, but in different configurations. Following these options, that were considered. There were two other options that have not been assessed further, and that was to go back to the Main South Road cul-de-sac, which was the original consultation option, and also a trial layout. So we've used two different types of analysis to assess the different options. One of those being an independent safety review undertaken by ABLE, and a second that looked at the assessment of effects on the network to support those investigations. These have been completed by external consultants so that they were independent of the in-house project team. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Paul Durden to the front table, who can talk through our safe system audit and our approach to safety.
Hi.
Great, thank you. Paul Durden, I'm a technical director with ABLE, and I have overseen and reviewed the report that we've prepared. So do you want to go on to the next slide? So the type of safety assessment that we undertook is what's called a safe system audit. So it comprises the safe system assessment framework and road safety audit components. What we're looking at is the extent to which each of the options aligns with safe system principles, and then we're also looking at any other safety issues that may manifest if you were to select that option. And the intent of our assessment is to provide you with all of the safety information that you need as a decision-making body to raise your awareness about the safety implications of the choices you make. So the safe system audit process is the process that's stipulated by the New Zealand Transport Agency, and it's founded on those safe system principles there. So we have some target safe system speeds around different collision configurations and for road users that may be involved. So when people are outside of vehicles, typically the safe system speed that we're looking at there is around 30 kilometres per hour. In the event of someone on a bike or walking who gets struck by a vehicle travelling at 30 kilometres per hour, that means they have roughly about a 10% chance of dying in a collision. And we're not saying that 10% is acceptable, but that's the industry sort of benchmark for a survivable speed. And then those that same 10% boundary condition is used for other configurations, such as a right angle side impact collision, 50 kilometres per hour, and then head on up towards 70 kilometres per hour. Next slide, please. So what we did with the options, you can see a summary of the results there, and I'm happy to answer some questions because I appreciate there's a lot of information on the slide and there's a lot more detail in the report that accompanied this. But basically, all of the options do deliver safety benefits, but they all leave behind some residual risks on the network as well. Options 1 and 4, which are the options to retain left-out movements only, do provide significantly better safety outcome for the intersection as a whole. And then there are varying degrees of risk that remains in terms of pedestrians and cyclists, just really associated with the different design characteristics around them. We've also considered other considerations beyond safety, but that influence safety, so it's really around people's perceptions. And I know from when we were out there on site, observing how people use that intersection or don't use the intersection is probably a better way of describing it. There was a lot of deliberate avoidance, and there were certainly times there when I decided to look away because I see like a child biking along the road right through a pinch point between buses and cars, and it's just like this probably isn't going to end well. I'd rather not see it happen. So there is significant risk that still remains on the network, and some designs address those better than others. And as part of our report, what we've said to council is if you wish to do this option, then there are ways to make this safer with upholding the intent of the option itself. It wouldn't fundamentally change. Next slide. So overall, we concluded that option 1 provided the best level of alignment with the design criteria that we considered, and we identified some opportunities to enhance the safety of that, which particularly relate to the crossing design and the location of that. Option 4 was the next most aligned. And then if a decision was made that retaining the right turn movement out was necessary for other reasons, then our recommendation is that option 3 better aligns with the criteria that we've established, more so than option 2, although a significant level of risk remains on the network.
So I think if we can make it through the presentation and then take questions, if that's okay. So just to address any issues around network effects with a closure of the right turn, I'd like to introduce John Faulkner from QTP, who's undertaken the modelling for us.
Hi.
Good afternoon. Yes, I'm John Faulkner from QTP, and I've done transport network modelling for this project. This is just going to be a very brief summary today. We've been over some of the stuff before, but this is just kind of focusing on the key issues with the variations between the 2 options, or the 4 options. I said 2 because effectively there's 2 groups of options. There's an option that includes the right turn and one that, or 2 that don't. And so in terms of a network modelling perspective, that's the main difference rather than the actual subtleties between the 2 variations of each.
Thanks for clarifying that.
So just with this first slide here, we can see it shows the demand currently using that right turn. So it's about 200 vehicles per hour, and this is in the morning peak, which is the worst possible period. So we've just looked at the morning peak because we know that the effects in the other periods aren't as bad, so it's almost the worst case looking at the morning peak. So we can see all the traffic using the right turn is coming up from Main South Road, obviously because from the south up Curlitz Road the right turn into Main South Road is banned, and from the north logically you would just use Yaldhurst Road and carry on through to Riccarton Road that way. There may also be some trips that start their journey in between that mid-block section between Curlitz Road and the intersection of Main South Road. So at the moment the delay there is about 8 seconds per vehicle on average during the morning peak, which isn't very much as far as delays go, and that's obviously because of the seagull arrangement there where you're only giving way to the right hand side, and then you kind of merge with the traffic as you're heading eastbound. So go to the next slide. So now this is looking at the of options 1 and 4. If you do away with the right turn at the intersection of Riccarton and Main South, I guess this is what people would intuitively think happens, and that is just simply that if you can't turn right anymore at the intersection, you have to divert up Curlitz Road and then turn right into Yaldhurst Road and go that way. And intuitively you might think, well, it's, you know, traffic's busy at the intersection at Curlitz Road and Yaldhurst Road, and you really don't want to put more traffic through there, especially right turns, because it'll, you know, intuitively you might think it might blow the delay out. But that's not necessarily the case if we go to the next slide. So what I can see here is it's actually, and this is what the traffic modelling can indicate to us, which takes into consideration people's behaviour and also the wider network interactions. And so we actually only end up with 100 vehicles going around and then turning right up into Yaldhurst Road. And the delay there, that's the total delay, it's 32 seconds. So it's 22 seconds currently, and we're adding about 10 seconds delay there. So, and again, that's good. 30 seconds delay in a morning peak is not considered to be a significant intersection delay at all. We also get some traffic coming through. This is not necessarily the trips that we're using the route before on Main South Road, but other trips that we're perhaps going up and doing the right turn are now coming through. It's just there's an opportunity for them to go left at the intersection of interest and then right into Brake Street, which is kind of accessing the kind of northern part of the shopping centre there. But again, this is the modelling showing this, which is purely based on travel time. Some people might actually would still prefer to use the traffic signals. It's just a modelling thing where it's absolute quickest time, and so that's where the model's directing the traffic. The increase isn't that much of a concern though. It's only 60 vehicles per hour, so to put that another way, the maths is easy. It's effectively equivalent to 1 vehicle every minute, potentially making that manoeuvre. And the riskiest part of it will be the right turn turning right at Yalters Road into Brake Street. So back in the other thing, you'll see that in terms of adding up the traffic, it didn't add up to 200, and that's simply because this diagram here shows TomTom data, which we've used to determine where everyone using the right turn, where they're coming from and going to. Now, this is summarised across the whole day, but what it's showing is that there's there's people branching off at all different points along, to get into Main South Road, and then once they're travelling east, they branch off in multiple directions, with very few travelling all the way along. And interestingly, like for example, those that make the right turn currently, about 7% of those will turn into Hanson's Lane, a lot of them going to the Woolworths, but you could easily achieve that. You can see with a lot of them originating from the Stockburn roundabout by continuing on Blenheim Road and then turning left into Hanson's Lane instead of turning right. And same for all the other destinations further east along Riccarton Road, or here even, there's quite a lot of destinations up on Clyde Road as well. And easily they could be accessed via Blenheim Road and then using other roads. And traffic does distribute itself across all available routes like that, minimising the impacts in any one location to establish a network-wide equilibrium. The only other thing I was going to say is the other focus on this has been on options 1 and 4, but option 3, I'd also note that the option there for including the right turn, because it's reduced to a single lane, you'd end up, delaying the traffic to the point where the delay there ends up being about 40 seconds per vehicle, and it doesn't get much bigger than that because at that point it's actually quicker to go up around Keilitz Road, turn right into Yalters. So it's kind of, if you that option, you probably won't get that many people using the right turn there anyway. It's still, because it's just about more attractive to do it the same way if it wasn't there.
Thanks, John. And to finally finish off, I'd like to ask Crystal Anderson, our engagement lead, so she can provide information on what the community thought of the option when we consulted.
Hi everyone. So I'll just talk through the consultation for the original Church Corner Safety Improvements project that we consulted on last year. So obviously what we consulted on was what Gemma talked through earlier, so that was the cul-de-sac arrangement, removal of the right-hand turn. So we heard from 305 people made a submission, and in terms of the Main South Yalters intersection, we did ask people how safe they felt currently. We had 71 submitters, or 23% of our submitters, say that they currently feel safe at that intersection. And then they were asked if the proposed changes were implemented, how safe do they think they'd feel, and 173 or 57% said that they would feel safe. So while not everyone mentioned the removal of the right-hand turn, we did have 76 people make specific comments about the removal of the right-hand turn. So I'll just break those down for you in terms of who those people were. So we had 54 people make a comment that was in support of the removal of the right-hand turn, and then 22 people make a comment that was opposed to the right-hand turn removal. In terms of who they were, so we've done a breakdown based on how they use this intersection, their reason for travel, and as you can see here across different user types, there's still quite a strong support in those comments. As much as commuters were more likely than others to oppose it, we still have the majority of our commuters who made these comments in support. And then finally, just a breakdown by what type of mode people are using. During the community board, there was a lot of discussion around, vehicles versus cyclists and all those kinds of things. So we've just done a breakdown on who made these comments as well. And again, similarly, people in cars obviously were more likely to say that they opposed it. However, we still had more people supporting it in their comments who drove cars. In addition to that, we had 21 people who made generally positive comments in this section with no further detail, and we had 13 people make generally negative comments. We also had 36 people make comments that was concerning congestion.
Right.
So we start
Thank
with
you.
questions.
We do have questions. We've got Andre, Mark and Kelly, and then Tim, and then Yanni.
Thank you. Are we able to please bring up the comparison of options table? So if we, between option 1 and 3, so an intersection safety risk, 88% reduction and versus 63, so the numbers aren't too dissimilar, but we go down to people driving. Option 1, risk eliminated. Option 3, still high risk. I'm just looking at those numbers, which are reasonably similar, but the words and their tone are the complete opposite and not similar at all. I'm just struggling to get my head around that part.
I can help answer that for you. So in terms of the safe system assessment, where we have the percentage reductions, that takes into account 3 factors, which are multiplicative: exposure, likelihood and severity. So all of those factors contribute to the safe system assessment score. So if you reduce exposure, so for instance, the right turn out is eliminated in terms of risk under options 1 and 4, because there is no exposure for that movement because it is gone. With the options remaining, there's still there is a reduction in the safe system assessment score, because you have platforms installed which will likely reduce impact speeds in the event of a collision, but the likelihood isn't reduced at all under option 3. So you do get a benefit there, and it doesn't just consider one particular movement at the intersection, it considers a range of intersection scores. While we're using the terminology high risk in terms of people driving, there are still several factors there that means that the likelihood of a collision occurring still remains high risk of happening. Yeah. So in particular, option 3 brings the brings the right turn movement out a lot closer to that point where traffic heading west currently manoeuvres right. So the impact time or the reaction time to select a gap in traffic somewhat diminishes, even though there is a speed platform there, or a speed ramp there, which would hopefully reduce some speed. So we're saying that there still retains a high risk in terms of likelihood that crash would continue to happen.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark?
Thank you. The closure of the right turn and moving the traffic potentially up into the Curlitz Pier Aldhurst intersection, was there consideration given there of how dangerous that particular intersection is when it comes to your safe system assessment?
No, we were just asked to look exclusively at the impacts around this particular intersection, yes.
So that particular Aldhurst Curlitz Pier intersection, I understand, is more high risk than the right turn that's looking to be closed. Would that be a fair assessment?
I couldn't comment, sorry.
Right. For staff, when this does come back on a report, could we have the information on how high risk that particular intersection is to be included? Because if you're going to move the traffic from one to the other, you'd want to know what you're moving it into. That would be handy. I'd also be interested to have data around that Curlitz Pier Aldhurst intersection spoken to, if we could.
Yeah, we can pull that out quite easily.
Is there any possibility of having a trial done with temporary traffic management of closing the right turn, and then you're actually going to be moving the traffic to where it's likely to go, and then doing an assessment on that?
Yes, so the reason we discounted the trial option is just around the costs. So this project is being funded from the Minor Road Safety Program. We have, I guess, the confidence from the safe system assessment that's been done and the modelling as to how it would work. So if we were to fund a trial, the cost of that would be on top of the construction works for Main South Yoldhurst, which means that something else is probably going to have to drop off that program. So we have only come with this option, and we discounted the trial option just around costs.
Thank you.
Am I allowed to continue, or?
Yeah, I'm just going to actually point out that we've kind of come to the time for this. Are people able to stay a bit longer than 2:30 today? Because we've got one more after this. So if we go for another, say, 10 minutes. So if we just make it snappy, sorry.
It's a fairly chunky
I know,
decision
Mark.
we're making here, so.
Yeah.
So on the ranking of intersections in Christchurch, you say in the top 3%. So how many intersections in Christchurch would be higher up and more important to make changes like this too?
Yes, so that number comes from 5,700 intersections. This number currently sits at around 130. But the issue with this intersection is that continuous right turn issue. There isn't any other intersections I'm aware where there's a consistent crash type that happens as it does at Main South.
And I guess there's some sort of, balance to the number of crashes in 10 years. How many vehicles in 10 years would use that intersection? Be multiple thousands, I'm sure.
Yes.
Okay, but it is what the data is what it is, Mark.
Yeah, I know, but
So-
we're trying to get some balance.
I know,
here
I'm
into
going to
context.
move on actually to a councillor that doesn't live in this ward, because I would assume that you would have had that information. If we run out of time, please just put your questions through. Kelly?
Yeah, my question's pretty simple. Why is this even before us? Hasn't it been dealt with at community board?
Okay, Kelly, that's another political question that we
Well,
know the
it's not a
history of
political
that.
question. I'm just seeking
No,
a simple answer.
have
They've got
failed
9 people on
They
their
have failed
board.
to address it, so it's, they have decided to send it here. Tim?
But there's an odd number of people on a community board.
Tim?
Yeah, thank you. Look,
I don't get it.
this is put in front of us. I've got concerns about, on slide 13, we've got evidence base, but realistically, it's just an opinion, because I don't know the area that well, but I have had kids living in the area, etc., and trying to get across the road to Brake Street, there's a lot of traffic going through there. So if you've got 50 vehicles in an hour doing a left and then a right onto Brake Street, I've personally just gone to State Highway 73, onto Pearce Street, and then down Bowen Street to get to but that's not here at all. And we say it's a minor road budget, but what are the extended issues and costs that we would look at if we've done this? And there are other issues, because if you really want to solve it, on your slide 15, why don't we put road cushions at the start or the entrance at Sockburn and get everybody to go down Blenheim Road, which would take the pressure hopefully off this totally. Yeah. The other quick one, has anyone looked at road cushions on Riccarton Road as it sweeps into Yoldhurst Road? And wouldn't that kind of slow that traffic down to give those people turning right just a wee bit more time to... I don't know, it's not my area,
No,
but it
that's
is
okay,
in
but
front
you've
of
asked
us.
the question. Yep. Do we have an answer to that?
Yes, so in terms of traffic moving along Pearce Street and Bowen Street, we can report on that in the main report when it comes for a decision. It has been looked at as part of the wider Church Corner program. Yep. We were just focusing mainly on the right turn there. And we do have a package of speed humps going on the local streets within that area to slow traffic down that is moving through. All options, as per the notice of motion, looked at providing a dual crossing on the east side of the intersection. and that is raised in every option to make sure that there's some traffic calming before that right turn is made. With the option 2 that keeps the kind of half seagull arrangement, the crossing is staggered, but we do include another speed hump, so you would have multiple
So they're
traffic
already in
calming
there.
devices in
Yep.
the plan.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Yanni, please be concise with your question.
I'm just a bit confused about the whole report, and I would like to get the financials. But it says the community would requested staff to provide options that keep the right-hand turn. But I've got a presentation on removing the right-hand turn, and we've got. Sorry, what? Sorry, I'm just reading. So the options that keep the right-hand turn, we've got 2 options that don't.
Yep.
And I'm just trying to understand from the submissions that were received, which is their preferred option.
So this
In the
submitters
table.
or the community haven't had the chance to have a say on retaining the right turn out. If there's a desire to keep the right turn out, we would need to reconsult so the community could have their say, because they only had to say on the cul-de-sac option. The left turn was then retained following the deputations held at the February 15th meeting, and the notice of motion does ask staff to provide options that keep the right-hand turn, the dual crossing, and mitigate serious crash incidents. With options 1 and 4, we can eliminate that risk, but with options 2 and 3, we're only minimising the risk. So we still looked at all the options possible that we can deliver, but we did have to analyse to make a recommendation in the report that will come to council.
Okay, so I'm just kind of confused. Like, what is it you want from us today?
This is an
That's just
information
feedback.
session. That's all it is.
Cool.
Mel?
So can we just get clear about the process around future engagement consultation?
On this.
This has come to the council because I put in a notice of motion to reverse the decision made by the community board, so that council can make an informed decision to decide on something that's really contentious that split the community board politically.
Sure, but what I'm just trying to understand is a report going to come to council for a draft consultation flyer with the options to go out for consultation and engagement?
It's been consulted on.
They've done all that.
So it's been consulted on. It's had changes made accordingly due to the submissions,
Right.
which retained the left in, left out option.
Okay. Sorry for being
But
confused.
we've
I
just-
just
So
heard
there's no right
staff
answer.
say that
Hang
we
on.
hadn't
We've just
consulted on
had
the
a
options.
update on the result of the consultation and the
Sorry, I
submissions.
just asked if what the preferred option was from the consultation, and was told that those options were not consulted on. So if someone can clarify that, that would be great.
So the option that we've explained was a cul-de-sac, so it was a complete closure of Main South at Riccarton. And so we're working through the options. The report that would come to council is staff recommendation that the safest option is what we would like to recommend again, which is what we took to the community board, and they've
Because the
given support.
cul-de-sac was rejected by the
Correct,
submitters, so
yes.
this is an alternative plan.
It's an alternative.
Mel?
Couple of things. One, it says the 76 crashes. So one was it talked about 2 of them, and then 6 in a minor injury. I was just wondering what kind of crashes they were, or what type of road user they were.
Correct. So the serious injury crashes, one of them involved a person riding a bike,
Yeah.
travelling westbound, and was hit by someone exiting Main South Road, and the other one involved a bus, and the driver turning right from Main South Road misjudged how far away the bus was.
But for the other 6, were they cyclists or pedestrians? The minor ones.
I can make sure that's in the report. I haven't got that with me.
Okay.
just yet.
And then the other question around that safety comparison, because it's interesting that the options where the that right turn out is not there anymore. That the elimination risk, the risk eliminated is mostly for people who drive, yet it's drivers who would like to retain that risk, which was an interesting note. But I guess the thing that was interesting for me was option 3, with the significant improvement for people walking and cycling versus the other options. And I guess it's just how that whole thing is, that crossing is quite separated from where the right turn is it right?
That is correct. So under option 3, they're able to get much more direct crossing movement in there for pedestrians that reflects a more realistic desire line, unlike options 1 and 4, which have a sort of an indirect line which creates the risk that some pedestrians won't utilise the facility and will cross in what they perceive as a more convenient location, but maybe a higher risk location where motorists may not expect them. So there are benefits, and also under option 3 is enabled retention of some on-road cycling facilities as well, just due to the space that's available under that design option as well.
Yeah, do many people cross there, like by foot at the moment? Because I've never seen anyone by foot there.
Yeah, I'd encourage you to go out there and have a look. There definitely are.
Okay.
It's a very busy bus corridor with I think there's about 4 services that go through there every sort of 5 minutes. Plus you've got the shopping area over to the north, plus the Woolworths to the south. There is a lot of, I would see, a lot of suppressed demand, whereas people, I think, would like to walk and cross, but are entirely put off. So they're probably crossing out of their way or not undertaking those trips at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Time is up, but Mark, if you've got one last quick one.
Yep, just a quick question around the consulting. When this was consulted as the cul-de-sac, the NZTA upgrade was going to happen as well. So does that kind of invalidate the consulting in a way that because NZTA are no longer doing their upgrade, we need to really reconsult to make sure that we pick up that major change?
So the 2 consultation processes did run quite separately. Whilst we alluded to the changes being made at the intersection when we went out for consultation, NZTA undertook their own consultation. We weren't privy to any feedback, and then it was put on hold. So I don't think that the decision making around this is tied to what NZTA were proposing at P.Hurst. So I don't think we need to reconsult on the plan that we're recommending for approval. However, if we did want to retain the right turnout, that does change what was on offer. And so, yes, we would need to reconcile.
Right.
Thank
and
you.
I guess one other question, hearing about the pedestrian movements in there, I mean, I've been there and seen it. They're like sheep, they'll go where they like. Has there been any consideration to controlling that by perhaps putting some fencing on the central island to stop them from doing what they do? Because I know in the Hornby area, we've got between the hub and Dressmart fencing that forces you to go at particular crossing points. Has that been considered?
That would need to be considered at detailed design.
Right.
There's pros and cons to pedestrian fencing.
Okay. Tyler, and then we've got Aaron's got one as well.
Yeah,
And then
thanks so much for coming in, guys. Appreciate that. When the report comes to council at some point, are we able to gain a more contextual perspective of everything, which includes the wider minor safety improvements on Waimari Road, Hanson's Lane, etc., just to make it easier to sort of understand why this is here? That'd be great. Thanks so much.
And Aaron, just quickly, if you could, please.
Yeah. So 2 really quick ones. Firstly, what happened when the staff met with the community board on site to discuss the options? How did that go? Because everyone would have seen it in context.
So there hasn't been
Yeah,
any
so
on-site
contingent.
meeting. There hasn't been any on-site meeting.
Okay, there's been no on-site meetings.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Wow, that's bizarre.
That's up
and
to-
then the other one is extremely bizarre, but given it's so contentious. And then the other one is on the other picture, which has not this one. I can't change it, but the other image. So are these the only 2 options we're looking at now? Okay. The big giant, because there'll be such a change of traffic flow. Was it considered that on the lane bound towards town that it would be 2 lanes going that way instead of that giant red thing?
No, there isn't any. There isn't enough space to provide the 2 lanes through where the crossing point is, and that would change the type of crossing that would be provided. So the 2 lanes start to the east, so where it's pretty much just kind of formalising a bus lane around the existing bus stop.
There's a lot going on there. Okay, thank you, Aaron. So, and thank you, everyone, for your presentation. Sorry, we just got a bit rushed at the end there, but look, you can put questions through to staff. I'm sure that's okay prior to this coming to the council. Okay, so now we're moving on to the last briefing for today, Whakaropo, Littleton and Kakorarata Port Levy Adaptation Plan Update and the next steps. So we've got Jane, Tom, Crystal. This is something completely different. Far away. So look, I know that we're over time, but we'll have to finish at 2:55 to 3. I've got another meeting to get to at 3, so.
We'll shoot through
Yep,
as fast
thank
as we can. We're here today to just provide you with some background information in advance of you receiving the draft adaptation plan for Whakaraupō, Littleton Harbour and Kokorarata Port Levy. So we just wanted to socialise with you some of the, the background to coastal adaptation planning, the process we've gone through with the coastal panel, the coastal panel's preferred pathways, some examples of those, so you can give you a bit of a hint of what you expect to see when the draft plan lands, our approach to funding and managing costs, and the approvals process from here. So I'll move reasonably fast given time, but please jump in if there's anything that I'm moving too fast on. Just some background information, and I think you've received briefings on this previously, so I guess one of the key points here is that across the district, as the seas are rising, we've also got the data showing us that the land has been dropping since the earthquakes, which does in some places double the rate of sea level rise. So this is just really giving you a sense of the reason or the rationale for this work that we are leading in the district. That effect is quite specific to different areas, so you can sort of see the projected increases to sea level rise on the right-hand column there. There's a significant risk as a result to our assets, and you've seen this table before, I believe, which indicates that, you know, a third of our network stormwater and wastewater pipes and a quarter of our roads are at risk with just 20 centimetres of sea level rise, which we can expect to see within about the 2050 period of time. Costs to council are quite significant, so I won't delay on that one. This is why the CHAP program was set up. So we've been tasked with working with those communities that are going to be impacted by coastal flooding, erosion and rising groundwater to develop adaptation pathways. One of the first things we did was release a policy document that set out our approach to it, set out roles and responsibilities, front-footed the fact that our focus would be on planning for those public assets, and we also have on the right-hand side there the MFE wheel, which is the way that we go about adaptation planning. Adaptation planning is a little bit of a different way of thinking, and so just wanted to focus on this slide a little bit, Dynamic Adaptive Policy Pathways, or DAP as it's known. And this is really based on the need to, what everyone in the jargon is, planning in deep uncertainty. There's a range of uncertainties. We've got 100 years that we plan for, and of course over that period of time there could be quite significant change. We don't know the exact rate of sea level rise because we don't know how quickly the world will reduce emissions. At the moment we don't have strong central government direction for how we're planning, and we know that over time there could be significant changes in our district, like population movement, quite significant changes for council in terms of funding constraints. So the DAP process allows us to kind of plan forward even despite all of those uncertainties. And just to give that example up there, just to kind of explain this, because you'll see some of these metro maps as we move forward. Essentially what this is saying is that in the short term we could, in this case, maintain a walkway, but at some point that will fail, and that's that threshold at the end of the line. So what we do is we try and plan in advance of that to get an early warning, which is called a signal, and that is maybe, for example, that sea levels might have risen by 10 centimetres, and we know it's time to start paying attention to our adaptation pathway. So instead of attaching dates, we're using signals and triggers, basically environmental indicators. The options that fall beneath that, flood-proof, move or close the walkway, are all viable options. And what you'll see soon are the preferred pathways that the coastal panel has recommended that we take through those viable options. However, DAP allows us to change later on. So, for example, the coastal panel might suggest we maintain the walkway, we then move to flood-proof it, and then we move to move the walkway. However, in sort of 20 years' time, when we hit those signals and triggers, we might not have sufficient funds, and we might drop some of those options and move to the final one, which is just simply to close the walkway. The point I'm making essentially is that this gives us a lot of opportunity in the future to change as the environment requires or as circumstances necessitate. Our process is very much a co-creation process with community and with Runanga. So the coastal panel is at the heart of this process. We have a coastal panel for the Whakaropō and Kokorarata area. As we move around the district, we would establish new coastal panels with people from the area and with Runanga representatives. On our coastal panel for Whakaropō, we have both Ngāti Wheki and Kokorarata, and we have a number of community members sitting on the panel. We've had a fantastic coastal panel, and it's been a really great process because as we've moved along, we've all sort of started to converge in our thoughts and our decision making. Supporting the coastal panel is the STAG, the Specialist and Technical Advisory Group. These are the people on the STAG. So the green people are council staffers. We've got some pink coloured people who have come from other areas. We have a wide range of expertise sitting on the STAG. Off to the top right are some names who you'll be familiar with from council who weren't on the original STAG, but they've become very, very strong advisors to us as we've moved through and planned for example, with Paul Devlin, the marine infrastructure, with Matt Pratt, the facilities. So this is very much a process that's a collaborative process right across council and has had fantastic support from all of those different asset owning parts of council. This is the area we're planning for essentially, and within it we have focused in on 6 priority adaptation locations that are listed on that map. I'm not going to go into great detail about our process. I'm happy to talk to people about it outside of here, but I guess long story short, it's been a very intensive process, and it's taken, we've been meeting with the coastal panel sort of monthly since late 2022. We started out with technical assessment and working with Runanga. We did an engagement with the community on their what they felt was most important, which have formed the basis of community objectives. So we're very much driving this around their planning. The coastal panel then went away and did some assessment of a range of different adaptation options and shortlisted some. We took those out, we took those out to a second community engagement to make sure that the wider community had the opportunity to comment on that. And then the coastal panel has taken that feedback and has identified these preferred pathways that we're getting closer to bringing to you. The point of the process that we're at now is we want to take out our draft adaptation plan for our final community engagement. We will then make changes as needed and bring that back to council for a decision. One of our final slides goes into a little bit more detail on that process. And I'm now going to hand it over to Tom to talk about some of the example pathways that we want to kind of share with you today.
Cool. So without sort of touching on all of the pathways that we've produced with the coastal panel, we've got around 23 of them. What we'll be doing today is just focusing on, I think, on 3 examples. So if I sort of crack into it, we'll first move to the head of the harbour at Teddington with a roading related adaptation pathway. So just to talk you through this diagram, what we're showing here is 2 sections of road that the panel have been working on. The blue section, which is Governor's Bay to Teddington Road, and then the orange section, which is Charteris Bay Road. You can see here that the panel actually have slightly different recommendations for these 2 different sections of road, and that's because one is seen as a more critical sort of lifeline route, and there's an alternate route over Gebbies Pass, so I'll sort of get to that. And then the blue one, which is the Governor's Bay to Teddington Road, has been proposed by the panel to be in time transition to a lower level of service. So essentially what that would mean is in time accepting more frequent road closures, temporary road closures, and other sort of similar impacts. So the road might go one way, for example. And to talk you through this, why this is needed, the road is obviously really flat. It's in a really ecologically significant wetland, lowland environment. As sea levels rise, the road will be overtopped and flooded more often. So either we can raise it up out of those flood levels, move it inland, as is indicated by some of those white lines, those alternative pathways, or road closure is a possibility, which you can see has not been preferred by the panel. The last thing to touch on this slide is the bottom left little table. You can see our estimate for raising of the Charteris Bay Road. The orange section is around $25 million to construct that 1 metre higher road section. Involves installation of culverts and other works as well. Whereas to manage the blue line at the reduced level of service, the cost is about 1/3 of that. So there's a saving to be achieved through acceptance of more frequent impacts. thought we'd show you some of the work that we're doing with local consultancy that's working on some of the visuals for this sort of stuff. The lines, the pathway maps that we showed on the previous slide are useful and logical for some people, but sort of grounding this stuff is equally important. So we've been working on some sort of visualizations of what these pathways might look like. In this case, the sort of key distinguishing factor is that the label for number 1, which is Governors Bay to Teddington Road, is showing a road at a lower level and a lower level of service, and we would obviously attach a range of commentary around these visuals as well. Whereas labelled number 2, which relates to Gibby's Pass Road and Charteris Bay Road, is shown at a higher level with culverts and would therefore obviously be more resilient. Move around the bay just to the west of Teddington, away from roads and to tracks. This one here for Governors Bay to Allendale foreshore track, a really well used track, and a range of options you can see here have been considered by the panel. So one around a reduction in level of service, one around a long-term protection, and one around a closure. We also did consider relocating the track, but I won't sort of touch on that in too much detail here. The panel in this case landed on a preference toward reducing levels of service, so essentially still maintaining it for a period of a couple of decades, potentially as is indicated there, as much as 40 to 50 years. But as that track is more frequently overtopped and inundated by tides and waves, we would look to transition towards a closure, which is indicated by that drop down of that yellow line there. And that's obviously a substantive cost saving. I think our estimate to protect the track long term is around 12 to 15 million, and the preferred pathway of the panel is a fraction of that. Around to the other bay within our adaptation area, over to Kokararata. This is a really challenging spot, a spot where these impacts are particularly proximate on the road network. The backdrop of this image at Parr Road is a place that is flooded fairly frequently already, and a location where the Runanga and the communities feel quite concerned about their isolation risk, because not only is this road at risk, but there are various other roads within the network that you have to drive across to get here that are also vulnerable. So in this case, the panel have landed on a recommendation towards a relocation of the road. Runanga in particular have emphasised that they do not want to see hard engineering along the shorefront to retain the road on its existing alignment. So they don't want to see big seawalls along the foreshore, big substantial works to sort of retain that road. Our transport teams and stormwater teams have some good sort of interim things that they're looking at with the Runanga, which will buy some time, but longer term their preference is towards a road on a new route. We thought we'd share this because it's a key part of that sort of isolation challenge that Te Runanga or Kokararata are concerned about, as is the wider community. This is the Kokararata Wharf just out in front of the marae, and this is not even stormy weather, so this is just the wharf in a spring tide. So this happens monthly. And you can only imagine with a bit of wind or a bit of storm surge that this wharf would be underwater. So as a potential sort of useful lifeline asset, you can see why this is of concern, because if the road's out and this is underwater, for example, that community can feel quite disconnected. So through our work, we're obviously also developing an adaptation pathway for this wharf, and the panel's recommendation for that wharf is to replace it with a new, more resilient structure, but I won't go into that now. Last bit from me was just to provide some of the sort of wider context. Roads and marine infrastructure have been a real focus and theme for our adaptation planning in Whakaropō and Kokararata. So what we've been doing is working on this visual that tries to bring some of those ideas together. The green lines relate to sections of road where the panel have recommended a pathway where we would retain the existing levels of service, and the orange lines relate to parts of the road network where levels of service might be reduced in time. We've also got a range of other lines across that visual that relate to lifeline connections between wharves and other marine infrastructure, because we've noted through our work, and this has really come through our engagement both with Runanga and communities, that people really see jetties and wharves as real sort of lifeline assets for them, and that sort of rung true or held true following the Canterbury earthquakes as well. Yeah, that's it from me, and I'll pass back to Jane.
Awesome, thank you.
Right, so just wanted to talk about some next steps really. In terms of our approach to funding adaptation options, the reason I spent a bit of time talking to you about the DAP approach is to emphasise that the Coastal Panel's got their recommended preferred pathways, but we have more certainty about those in the shorter term. So in the longer term, we do have the ability to change course if needed in response to things like population movement, funding constraints, etc. So when you see the final council report after this next engagement, we will be flagging funding for short-term actions only. So we're looking at sort of that 10-year type horizon. Some funds are already on budget and some of the asset classes already, but we may be seeking in principle approval for additional funds that would be then sought in the following LTP through those asset classes. We also are very cognizant that we don't want to sort of bump the priorities for other asset classes. For example, the landfill that we're looking at in Allendale, I think is about number 4 or 5 in terms of priority for the landfill team. So those asset groups will need to also do that prioritisation work themselves. Longer term, we would reassess the actions as we hit those signals and triggers. We're very conscious of the fact that we've been planning only in Whakaropō so far, and over time we'll need to move into the city, so there may be some bigger investments needed still. And therefore, once we have those adaptation plans out on the table right across the district, we can look at reprioritising those wider investments that might be needed across the district. You're all aware, of course, and we appreciate the support in the LTP for the establishment of a climate fund. The intention with that is that it's an intergenerational transfer, essentially. When we've started looking at the expenditure just in this adaptation area, the bulk of it is sort of in out years. You know, we're sort of talking around about 20 to 50 years on. And so the purpose of this fund is to essentially gather funds now and help support the transition in later years, because younger generations will otherwise have to pay all the costs. So that fund is going to be something you'll be hearing a bit more about in a report back in the next couple of months. These sorts of messages are filtering through in our engagement. So you can see here some of the key messages we've been talking about with communities. Some of those harder conversations we're having around how to essentially balance investments across the district, and some of the challenges that we are facing as we try and maintain infrastructure into, you know, some of these climate impacts that are going to make it increasingly hard to sustain. So we have been quite open in sharing this information with the Coastal Panel and with community in our engagements. Last slide, I believe, is our list of those more proximate investments that we would be likely putting up in the final report. To summarise, it's around about 22 million, depending on whether the protection works in Marine Drive is needed alone, or whether we also need to raise the road at that point in time. It could be a staged piece of work, so we can come back with more detail about that. That's pretty much. Oh no, it's not. Crystal is thinking about the process from here.
I'll just briefly touch on the process from here. So as you'll be aware, there's been many engagement opportunities to date for the community. We went out in 2022 to ask the community about what their values were in the area, and then 2023, yes, on the sort of draft options that the Coastal Panel was looking into. And then the next step is to go out with this, with the preferred pathway. So staff have been working to take those preferred pathways and put them into a draft adaptation plan for the area, which will come to council for adoption of the draft. We're hoping that'll be in October, around about mid-October. And from there, once you adopt the draft for consultation, we will take it to formal consultation with the community. that'll be approximately a month, and then we will come back. There will be a hearings panel to hear from submitters, and then hopefully we can wrap that up by the end of the year, and you can make a formal decision on the adaptation plan in December or early next year.
Great, thank you. So we've got time for just a couple of questions if anyone has any on this. It's a really good presentation. Thanks so much. And I know there's a lot of work behind all this, so really, I know it's been going on for quite a few years, so you're doing really well. Have you got one, Sarah?
Just a quick comment that while the work has been happening specifically around whakaraupo kōkaurarata for this adaptation plan, that staff have also been engaging with other communities. I was just at Redcliffe's last night, and Jane and Tom were presenting to the Redcliffe's community. I've been asked to come talk to them about the program generally, and giving them a heads up on the types of things that would need to be discussed with that community in the future. And also, I think people are wary about this process to start with, thinking that what might come back to us is a desire from the community to do everything, do it now, protect everything we've got, put up hard infrastructure, all of those kind of things. And so it's really pleasing to see that the process that's been gone through has led to a really deep understanding by the community and the panel specifically about the realities of the situation, what's possible, what's not. And when those things are then weighed up against the rest of the city's priorities, once we've got all the plans, it's going to put us in a really good position to get ahead of the big disasters and the community impacts. So yeah, thank you so much for the work.
Yeah, I like the way you've done that. You know, the lines, it's really good. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. And you can't kind of estimate the work that's gone into it and the risk that is coming towards us. So in the next 50 years, if we're looking close to 0.5 metre, we've got to really be honest about what their financial effects will be in our city and what, as a city, we are realistically able to afford. So I think with the key messages, the one thing that we haven't mentioned is retreat, irrelevant where that is. And I think that's got to be one of the important things that we start talking about, because you've been very realistic with the others. And the number one thing I'm concerned at, and staff have been very clear about this, but we've got to be very clear that we cannot lift undeliverable expectations for the communities in the next 50 to 100 years. Because we also have AF8, if we're looking at next 50 years, I think modelling has said at least a 30% chance that happens. It's probably higher now, and some are saying it's higher. So a lot of things can be Mother Nature's decided she's had enough of us, and might want to just give us a bit of a reminder about who's boss. So thank you very much.
I will just point out that closing infrastructure is a form of retreat. So like the panel have recommended closing tracks, those kind of things.
That's right.
The one thing that this program doesn't do, and this is the program that was approved by council, is because we currently don't have responsibility for private property, which is what people tend to talk about when we talk about retreat. So for individual private homes, that's not currently our role and responsibility. However, the issues and option stuff and the stuff that the select committee is currently looking at for the adaptation planning may end up putting the private property sort of financial space and retreat firmly with councils, or shared between councils and central government, which is it's a different conversation. It's one that needs to be had, but
well, we
currently have our
Okay, thank you all. Thank you very much for that. We'll see you all 9:30 a.m. tomorrow for yet another exciting city council meeting. Yeah.
Just a follow-up question around the drop-in session.